Cemeteries can often be places of great beauty. However, with the remains of so many people buried in such a small space, it's no surprise that for many people cemeteries invoke fear and dread. The thought of so many bodies just a few feet beneath the ground has led to graveyards often being associated with ghosts, hauntings, and the occult. And here are my choices for 5 of the most haunted graveyards on Earth. Number 5. Bachelor's Grove Cemetery. Located in Cook County, this small and now abandoned cemetery has earned a reputation as being one of the most haunted spots in America. Burials first began at the site in around 1840, and officially it only contains 82 plots. However, there are believed to be many more bodies buried here. It's thought that immigrant workers who met an untimely end while working on the nearby canal are laid to rest here, and there are even darker rumours that the site has been used by Chicago crime families as a convenient dumping spot for the bodies of their victims. The graveyard is in a poor state of repair, and many of the tombstones have been vandalised. Disturbingly, many of the bodies buried here have also disappeared over the years, and there have been whisperings and rumours that satanic rituals are often held at the site. Many of the gravestones have been knocked over, stolen, or spray painted on, and loose bones can be found littered throughout the cemetery. Such desecration of the site has led to many believing that the haunting is a result of the terrible vandalism, while others believe that more sinister forces are responsible. Several visitors have claimed to have found the remains of animals that have been slaughtered in a ritualistic manner strewn across the graveyard, while others have reported finding strange inscriptions carved on tombstones and nearby trees. These discoveries have led to many believing that occult rituals are being held on the cemetery grounds. The site is officially abandoned, however its chain-link fence can be easily bypassed using the numerous holes that have been cut into it by trespassers. Unsurprisingly, a huge number of strange sightings and experiences have been reported by those brave enough to visit the site. Many have mentioned feeling rapid temperature drops, seeing strange orbs and apparitions, and hearing crying and footsteps emanating from the darkness, and several of these occurrences have been claimed to have been caught on camera. One of the most common accounts refers to an apparition which has become known as the White Lady or Madonna, and was rumoured to have been captured in this photograph. The transparent woman is usually seen sitting on a tombstone and is believed to be the ghost of a woman buried next to her young child, somewhere at the cemetery. It's not known if this is just a legend or based on truth. However, there is a small tombstone at the cemetery which is simply marked with the words, "Infant Daughter." Number 4. The Old Jewish Cemetery in Prague. This is the largest Jewish cemetery in Europe and was in use from the 15th century right up until 1786. It contains around 12,000 tombstones, however may hold as many as 100,000 bodies. Throughout its time in operation, the cemetery struggled with chronic lack of space. Jewish customs meant that old graves could not be removed, so new ways of obtaining space had to be developed. A new layer of soil would be heaped on top of an older grave, enabling a new body to be buried. In some parts of the cemetery, there are up to 12 of these layers, which explains why the grounds of the cemetery are raised several meters above the surrounding streets. This solution meant that old graves could be preserved, and also explains why the visible tombstones are so tightly packed together. Many of the visible tombstones commemorate a person buried several layers beneath the ground, while the soil itself conceals many thousand more hidden tombstones from the eyes of the living. Surprisingly, the graveyard survived World War II intact, despite Prague being captured by the Nazis. In a chilling brush with history, the graveyard and surrounding Jewish quarter is believed to have been spared destruction so that it might one day become, quote, a museum of an extinct race. With up to 100,000 souls packed into such a tight space, it's not surprising that the cemetery has had numerous reports of hauntings, with many visitors to the site claiming to have seen ghostly apparitions moving between the forest of tombstones. One well-known legend associated with the cemetery is that of the Golem of Prague, which is rumoured to have been a clay monster created by one of the cemetery's deceased residents, designed with the sole purpose of protecting Jews from their enemies. According to the legend, the golem went out of control and had to be destroyed. However, some believe that it still patrols the cemetery grounds, protecting those buried there from any intruders. While the hauntings may just be the result of legends and overactive imaginations, this densely packed historic graveyard definitely has a really creepy and unsettling atmosphere. Number 3. La Noria Cemetery in Chile. Deep in the Chilean desert lies 2 abandoned towns, Humberstone and La Noria. The towns were founded in 1872 as part of a booming mining industry. However, economic problems eventually led to the closure of the mines, as well as the towns supporting the workers. Humberstone and La Noria were abandoned by 1960 and have remained empty to this day. The story does not end there, however, as legends and rumours about ghostly goings-on at the towns, and in particular the attached cemetery at La Noria, have become widespread. Local people outright refuse to enter the area, and actively tried to prevent outsiders from visiting for their own safety. The workers unfortunate enough to have toiled in the nearby mines were kept under very harsh conditions, which bordered on outright slavery. Accidents were rife due to poor safety procedures, and the death rate at the town was abnormally high. The bodies of all those who died of natural and unnatural causes were buried in a makeshift cemetery just outside of the town. Many of the poorly dug shallow graves lie open, and others appear to have been dug up and had their coffins opened, exposing the decaying skeletons held within. The official story is that this is the handiwork of grave robbers. However, the people who were buried in the cemetery were extremely poor and would have had little of value buried with them. A disturbing explanation for the open graves held by locals is that the dead rise after sunset and wander the nearby abandoned towns where they once lived. There have been several eyewitness accounts from those brave enough to have visited the area of apparitions and shadowy figures wandering around the abandoned streets. Screaming footsteps and sightings of children lurking around the old schoolhouse are also widely reported. The crumbling tombstones and exposed graves of the unmaintained cemetery, combined with its emptiness, adds to the graveyard's eerie atmosphere. Could the reports of figures moving through the night really be the dead risen from their graves? Or are the eyewitness accounts nothing more than stories? As if Lenoria wasn't creepy enough, a tiny 6-inch skeleton was discovered there in 2003, which has since been given the nickname of the Atacama alien. The skeleton's bulging head, unusual appearance, and tiny size led some to believe that the skeleton was that of an alien. However, later tests seem to indicate that the skeleton was in fact human, likely a young child suffering from some form of extreme mutation who survived until around the age of 6. Number 2. Greyfriars Kirkyard in Scotland. The Greyfriars Kirkyard Cemetery has been used for burials since the 16th century and holds the bodies of many well-known Scots. On a bright day, the graveyard may seem like a beautiful spot, with its perfect view over Edinburgh Castle and numerous ornate mausoleums. However, the atmosphere seems to change once darkness falls. Many of the graveyard's monuments are engraved with chilling images of death, including skeletons, skulls, and coffins, and with its once pleasant views now shrouded in darkness, your mind begins to contemplate the graveyard's dark history. The graveyard is connected to an old prison, and it was here that 1,200 people were imprisoned in brutal conditions during a religious strife in the 17th century. Only 257 of the prisoners made it out alive, with the rest meeting their end on the hangman's noose or dying as a result of conditions so terrible that it's been referred to as the world's first concentration camp. Many of those who died in the prison are buried within the Kirkyard graveyard, and ironically, George Mackenzie, the man who inflicted such suffering upon the prisoners, is also buried here in a tomb known as the Black Mausoleum. The ghost of George Mackenzie is believed to haunt the graveyard, his ghostly presence referred to as the Mackenzie Poltergeist. Sightings of the poltergeist began in 1998, after a local homeless man entered and desecrated Mackenzie's tomb. According to the story, the homeless man sought shelter from a heavy storm inside the Black Mausoleum, breaking its lock to gain access. Inside he found several coffins belonging to Mackenzie's relatives, and for some reason he decided to break one open. Upon doing so, the earth beneath his feet gave way and the man fell into a concealed pit containing the remains of plague victims who had been hastily disposed of. He fled the scene in horror, and shortly after, reports of strange incidents began to pour in. The first account came from a woman a few days later. Immediately after entering the Black Mausoleum, she was knocked back by what she described as a cold force. Not long later, another visitor was found unconscious, her neck covered in bruises as though she had been strangled. Local authorities responded by sealing the mausoleum, and it remains off limits to this day. However, this did not put an end to the accounts of strange goings-on at the graveyard, and there have been over 500 individual recorded incidents of the poltergeist attacking visitors to the graveyard since Mackenzie's tomb was desecrated. Reports include people being scratched, burnt, bruised, bitten, and even having bones broken. Most of these incidents occurring around the Black Mausoleum. Old Mackenzie isn't the only haunting reported at the graveyard though. Many visitors have reported seeing apparitions moving through the cemetery at night, which are thought to be the spirits of the hundreds of Mackenzie's victims who perished at the prison and are buried here. In fact, the hauntings were deemed so bad that in 2000, a priest called Colin Grant was brought in to perform an exorcism. He was unsuccessful and reported feeling overwhelmed by the souls lingering at the graveyard. Shortly after, he died from a heart attack during a séance, leading many to speculate that his death may have been linked with the hauntings at Greyfriars Kirkyard. Number 1. Highgate Cemetery in London. Located in North London, Highgate Cemetery was opened in 1839 and is the resting place for over 170,000 people. Its grounds contain countless elaborate tombs and catacombs, and several famous individuals are buried there, including Karl Marx. With so many people buried in its grounds, it's become well known for several high-profile hauntings, and many visitors to the cemetery have reported feeling unseen touches, seeing ghostly apparitions, and hearing strange sounds emanating from its historic mausoleums. Rumours about satanic cults meeting under cover of darkness deep within the graveyard have been circulating for decades, and these cults have been linked to one of the most well-known hauntings associated with the area, that of the Highgate Vampire. There have been multiple sightings which tend to describe the vampire as very tall, sometimes over 7 feet, with dark features and piercing eyes. According to the rumours, the Highgate Vampire was a medieval nobleman who had been a practitioner of black magic in Romania, and whose body had been transported to England in a coffin sometime in the 18th century. He was buried on the grounds of Highgate Cemetery, where he slumbered for decades until he was awoken by the satanic cults who were believed to be active within the graveyard. Disturbingly, there have been several reports of dead foxes along with other animals who seem to have been killed by wounds to the throat and were drained of their blood. Accounts of vampire attacks reached a fever pitch in the 1960s, and bizarrely the cemetery was home to several widely publicised vampire hunts where crowds of people climbed the graveyard's gates and scoured its grounds looking for the vampire with wooden stakes in hand. However, nothing was ever found, and the tales of the Highgate Vampire were seen as an elaborate hoax by many skeptics. Another commonly reported sight is that of an insane grey-haired old woman who is usually said to be running amongst the gravestones, searching for her children, whom she is widely believed to have murdered in a bout of insanity. The floating ghost of a nun, a red-eyed phantom, and a pointed-eared spirit with glowing eyes, known as Spring-Heeled Jack, also feature widely in eyewitness accounts of strange goings-on at the cemetery. Such a huge number of sightings has made Highgate Cemetery a popular tourist destination, and the number of sightings within its grounds shows no signs of slowing down. So those are my choices for 5 of the world's most haunted graveyards, but what do you think? Have you ever visited a cemetery that was believed to be haunted? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you again on the next video.